You know, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up knowing it must outrun the fastest lion or it'll die. Each day a lion wakes up knowing it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it'll starve to death. You know, it really doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you had better be running. And you know, the words that I just recited are on a plaque. And that plaque is in the hallway of the executive area at Wal-Mart's headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas. And you know, when Sam Walton used to walk out of his office each and every day, that plaque was right in front of him as he'd go out to do the business of retailing. So what you think about, you know, when you're out there trying to compete is that Wal-Mart is very aggressive. I'll tell you a story that is kind of the Canadian version of lions and gazelles. I was up at Whistler, in British Columbia, about 2 weeks ago. And I spoke at the International Council of Shopping Centers meeting. And this guy runs up to me, he says, I got to tell you this competitive story, and maybe you can use it in one of your speeches. So he says, he tells me the story about the two campers in British Columbia. And these two campers are up on the mountain in British Columbia camping overnight. And in the middle of the night, this grizzly bear comes into the camp and is madder than a hornet. So they get up and they get out of their sleeping bags, and the one camper peers out through the tent. And he turns around, and the other camper is strapping on his tennis shoes. And he says, what are you doing? You can't possibly outrun a grizzly bear. He said, I know I can't outrun a grizzly bear, but I don't have to. I just have to outrun you. And you know, when you think about the competitive world that we live in, and you think about the nature of competition in pharmacy in particular, the key to being successful is like that second camper. You have to be willing to adapt and change in order to be successful. And I know that when I wrote my first book called What I Learned from Sam Walton, How to Compete and Thrive in a Walmart World, I never intended to write a book to begin with. That was not my goal, to be an embedded reporter at Wal-Mart in Bentonville and to craft a book as a result of the experience. In fact, I didn't write a book till many years later after I found the teachings were so important. And what was interesting was this. When I would go out to do interviews for my book, I would talk to pharmacists, and I talked to convenience store operators, and I talked to grocers, and I asked them, what does it take to compete and thrive in a Walmart world? And I learned many, many valuable lessons that they told me that I put into my book. But what I also found out was that many of Walmart's competitors have gone out of business without a fight. Just a simple announcement that a supercenter was going to be built in their locale, they shuttered their businesses up and went out of business, which is sort of amazing to me. They did it without a fight. And not only is it possible to compete, survive, and thrive in a Walmart world, there's examples of pharmacies that have done it in virtually every town where Walmart has opened a supercenter. And I want to share some inspirational verses I get started this morning. If you're thinking that the idea of having more of these big box retailers coming into your communities is going to be a really difficult thing and tough competition, I hope you take some inspiration from these words. And it goes like this. If you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but you think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost. For out in the world we find, success begins with a person's will. It's all in a state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win the prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger woman or man. But sooner or later, he or she who wins is the one who thinks they can. And as a starting point for competition in this brutally competitive pharmacy world that we live in, it begins with the belief in the beginning that you can be successful. Because the reality is, if you think you can compete, you probably can. And if you think you can't compete, you probably can't. In either case, the way that you think at the beginning will determine the outcome and whether you'll be successful or not.